The dust-laden wind carried desperation through the streets of Stockton, California, as Katherine O'Sullivan hammered the final auction notice onto the weathered post outside what remained of her family's homestead. The year was 1876, and the drought that had swept through San Joaquin County had been as merciless as the bank that now held her fate in its ledgers. Catherine Katie, to those who knew her before life hardened her, stood back and surveyed her handiwork. Auction. All remaining possessions of the O'Sullivan estate, Saturday at noon. The black ink seemed to mock her as it dried in the relentless California sun. 2 years ago, she'd buried her father after consumption claimed him. 6 months ago, her mother followed, leaving Catherine alone at 22 with a failing farm and debts that multiplied like weeds after a spring rain. She'd sold the cattle first, then the good furniture, and finally the family silver that had crossed the country with her grandmother. Now, all that remained were some household items, her father's tools and the clothes on her back. "Miss O'Sullivan," Sheriff Tanner called as he rode up on his chestnut gelding, "got your notice at the office. I'm sorry it's come to this." Catherine brushed a strand of copper hair from her face and offered a thin smile. "We both knew it was heading this way, Sheriff. At least the bank is giving me until Monday to vacate after the auction." The sheriff removed his hat, revealing a receding hairline mapped with sweat. "If there's anything I can do, unless you've got $300 to settle with Stockton Mercantile Bank, I'm afraid there's nothing to be done," she replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. The sheriff nodded grimly and replaced his hat. "I'll be here tomorrow to keep things orderly." With a tip of his hat, he turned his horse and rode back toward town. Catherine watched him go, then walked back inside the small farmhouse. The emptiness echoed around her as she moved through rooms that had once held laughter and life. Now, they contained only the barest necessities and the items she'd arranged for the auction. Her father's workbench, her mother's rocking chair, kitchen implements, and a few pieces of furniture too large to sell previously. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Catherine sat on the porch steps and allowed herself a moment of tears. Tomorrow, strangers would pick through the last physical remnants of her life here. And then what? The bank had suggested domestic service in San Francisco, a clean break, they called it. As if severing her roots could ever be clean, morning arrived with unwelcome swiftness. Catherine dressed in her best and only remaining good dress, a simple blue cotton that had seen better days but still maintained some dignity. She pinned her hair neatly and scrubbed her hands until they were presentable, if still bearing the calluses of farm work. By 11, the first wagons began arriving. Farmers, shopkeepers, and townspeople, all drawn by the prospect of bargains. Some came out of genuine need, others from curiosity or, worse, pity. Catherine greeted them with a polite nod, determined to maintain what little pride she had left. Sheriff Tanner arrived as promised, positioning himself near the auction table where Catherine had arranged the smaller items. By noon, nearly 30 people milled about the yard, examining her possessions and assigning values far below their worth. "Shall we begin?" the sheriff asked, checking his pocket watch. Catherine nodded, her throat too tight for words. "Ladies and gentlemen," Tanner called out, his voice carrying across the yard, "we're here today for the auction of the O'Sullivan estate items. All sales final, cash only. Let's start with this fine set of kitchen tools." One by one, Catherine watched as pieces of her life were sold. Her mother's cherished tea set went to Mrs. Henderson for $2. Her father's prized carpentry tools, the ones he'd used to build this very house, were split among 3 different buyers. Each item that left felt like losing a finger, a limb, a piece of her heart. By mid-afternoon, the crowd had thinned, and most items were gone. Katherine stood beside the remaining lot, her mother's rocking chair feeling hollow inside. She collected just over $70, far short of what she needed to settle her debts. "Final item," Sheriff Tanner announced. "This well-crafted rocking chair. Who'll start the bidding at $5? A few half-hearted bids raised the price to $7, but interest waned quickly. As the sheriff prepared to close the bidding, the sound of hoofbeats drew everyone's attention. A rider approached from the main road, his tall form silhouetted against the afternoon sun. The horse, a magnificent black stallion, slowed to a walk as it entered the yard. Its rider dismounted with fluid grace that spoke of a lifetime in the saddle. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in the practical garb of a working cowboy. Dark pants, a faded blue shirt, worn leather vest, and a hat pulled low over his eyes. "Am I too late for the auction?" the stranger asked, his voice carrying a slight drawl that wasn't native to California. "Just finishing up with the last item," Sheriff Tanner replied. "A rocking chair at $7. The cowboy surveyed what remained of the auction, the nearly empty yard, the forlorn chair, and Katherine standing beside it, her chin high despite the circumstances. His gaze lingered on her face, and for a moment Katherine felt uncomfortably exposed. "I'll give 10 for the chair," he said, stepping closer. The sheriff looked around. $10 going once, twice, actually," the cowboy interrupted. "I'd like to know what else is available." Katherine frowned. "Everything's been sold except the chair, Mr. Zachary Mitchell," he replied, removing his hat to reveal dark hair and eyes the color of weathered leather. "Most folks call me Zach," he gestured around the yard. "This was everything." "Everything I owned," Katherine replied, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. Zachary's eyes took in the homestead, the small house, the empty barn, the overgrown fields. "And the land. Bank's taking it on Monday," Sheriff Tanner supplied. "Miss O'Sullivan here is settling debts before moving on." Something flickered in Zachary's expression as he looked back at Katherine. "And where will you go, Miss O'Sullivan?" The directness of his question caught her off guard. I haven't decided," she stammered, unwilling to admit she had nowhere. Zachary nodded slowly, as if coming to a decision. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a leather pouch. "I'll take the chair for 10, he said, counting out the money, "and I'll add 300 more for something else." Katherine stared at him in confusion. "There's nothing else to sell, Mr. Mitchell." A half smile crossed his face as he extended the money toward her. "I'll take you instead, Miss O'Sullivan." Gasps rippled through the remaining onlookers. Sheriff Tanner stepped forward, his hand moving instinctively toward his holster. "Now see here, Mitchell, as a ranch hand," Zachary clarified quickly, his eyes never leaving Katherine's stunned face. "I own the Double M, 20 miles east. Lost my housekeeper last month when she married and moved to Sacramento. Place needs someone who knows how to run a household, and from the looks of this homestead, you know your way around farm work." Katherine felt the blood drain from her face, then rush back with indignation. "I am not for sale, Mr. Mitchell." "Of course not," he agreed. "I'm offering employment, Miss O'Sullivan. Room and board plus $20 a month. The 300 is an advance against your wages, enough to settle your debt and give you a fresh start." He paused, his expression softening. "Unless you prefer domestic service in San Francisco," Katherine's mouth opened in surprise. How did he know about that? "Small towns talk," he explained, reading her question. "I was in the mercantile when Mr. Peterson was discussing your situation with the banker." Katherine's cheeks burned with humiliation. Her financial troubles were apparently fodder for public discussion. Still, Zachary Mitchell's offer presented an alternative. She hadn't considered staying in the county, working on a ranch rather than becoming a city servant. Why would you do this?" She asked suspiciously. "You don't know me." Zachary replaced his hat, shielding his eyes. "I know what it's like to lose everything, Miss O'Sullivan. I'm offering honest work on a prosperous ranch. You can keep your dignity and stay near your parents' graves." He gestured toward the small family plot visible on the hill behind the house. That last point struck home. The thought of leaving her parents' final resting place had been almost as painful as losing the homestead itself. "It's a fair offer, Katie," Sheriff Tanner said quietly. "Mitchell runs a reputable operation. Half the county's cowboys would give their eye teeth to work his range." Katherine looked from the sheriff to Zachary, still wary. "And if it doesn't work out, then I'll pay your passage to wherever you wish to go," Zachary replied simply. "No obligations beyond honest work." Katherine surveyed what remained of her life: an empty house, a solitary rocking chair, and a handful of insufficient funds. What choice did she truly have? "I accept your offer of employment, Mr. Mitchell," she said formally, "though I object to your manner of presenting it." A smile flickered across his face. "Noted, Miss O'Sullivan." He handed the money to Sheriff Tanner. "Would you mind seeing that the bank receives this? I'd like to avoid any confusion about Miss O'Sullivan's financial standing." The sheriff nodded, counting the bills before tucking them into his vest pocket. "I'll get a receipt and bring it out to the Double M next week." "When would you like me to start?" Katherine asked. "Today, if possible," Zachary replied. "Unless you need more time to pack your belongings." The blunt statement of her circumstances, that she had nearly nothing left to pack, might have stung from another person, but Zachary's matter-of-fact tone held no pity, only pragmatism. "I can be ready within the hour," Katherine said. "Though I'll need to settle arrangements about the house, and Sheriff Tanner can lock up when we leave," Zachary suggested. "And I can send some men back tomorrow to collect your chair and anything else you wish to bring." "I'll see to it, Katie," the sheriff confirmed. "The bank just wants the land and structure. They won't begrudge you your personal effects." Katherine nodded, overwhelmed by how quickly her life was changing direction. "Then I'll pack my things." As she turned toward the house, she heard Zachary address the remaining onlookers. "Auction's over, folks. Thank you for your business." Inside, Katherine moved through the nearly empty rooms one last time, gathering the few possessions that remained. Clothing, a small box of family photographs, her mother's Bible, and her father's pocket watch. All fit into a single trunk that had once held her childhood toys. When she emerged, only Zachary Mitchell remained in the yard, the sheriff and townspeople having departed. He was standing by the family plot, hat in hand, head bowed respectfully. "My parents," Katherine said as she approached. "My father built this place when they married. They're both up there now." Zachary turned to her, his expression somber. "I'll make arrangements for you to visit when you wish." The simple kindness threatened to undo her composure. Katherine blinked rapidly, determined not to cry in front of this stranger who was now her employer. "Thank you." He nodded toward her trunk. "Is that everything?" "Yes." Without comment, he lifted the trunk and secured it behind his saddle. "Can you ride?" "Yes, though I don't have a horse anymore." Zachary offered his hand. "You can ride with me to the ranch. I'll send one of the hands back with a wagon for your chair." Katherine hesitated for only a moment before placing her hand in his. His palm was calloused but warm as he helped her mount, then swung up behind her with practiced ease. As they rode away, Katherine allowed herself one backward glance at the only home she'd ever known. The setting sun cast long shadows across the yard, making the house seem to reach toward her with ghostly fingers. "It's never easy," Zachary said quietly, his voice close to her ear, "leaving a place that holds your memories." Katherine nodded, unable to speak through the lump in her throat. They rode in silence as the homestead disappeared from view, the distance growing with each hoofbeat. 20 miles east, the landscape changed from small farms to expansive rangeland. The scent of sage and dust filled the air as they crested a hill, revealing a sprawling ranch below. A large two-story house stood proudly amid several outbuildings, corrals, and a substantial barn. Cattle dotted the distant pastures and smoke curled invitingly from the main house chimney. "The Double M," Zachary announced. "Home to 5,000 head of cattle, 23 horses, and 16 ranch hands." He paused. "And now you." Katherine took in the vastness of the operation. "It's impressive. It's taken 10 years to build," he replied, a note of pride in his voice. "Started with nothing but a claim stake and 50 head of longhorns." As they approached the main house, a weathered man with silver hair emerged onto the porch. "'Bout time you showed up, boss." "Cook's threatening to feed your supper to the hogs," Zachary chuckled. "Miss O'Sullivan, this is Hank Forrester, my foreman. Hank, this is Katherine O'Sullivan, our new housekeeper." Hank's bushy eyebrows rose as he took in Katherine's appearance. "Well now, that's a sight better than Mrs. Winters. At least this one doesn't look like she'd sour milk with a glance." "Hank," Zachary warned, though amusement tinged his voice. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Forrester," Katherine said, extending her hand as Zachary helped her dismount. Hank's handshake was firm. "Just Hank, miss. We don't stand on ceremony much here except when the boss has company." A young boy of perhaps 12 dashed from the barn, skidding to a halt when he saw Katherine. "Who's this?" "Our new housekeeper," Zachary replied. "Miss O'Sullivan, this is Danny, our stable boy and general nuisance." The boy grinned, revealing a missing front tooth. "I take care of Thunderbolt," he announced, nodding toward Zachary's stallion. "Then you have an important job," Katherine replied seriously. Danny's chest puffed with pride. "Yes, madam." "Danny, take Miss O'Sullivan's trunk to the housekeeper's quarters," Zachary instructed. "Then see to Thunderbolt." As the boy hurried to obey, Zachary guided Katherine toward the house. "You'll have your own room off the kitchen. It's small but private. Mrs. Winters kept it spotless, so you should be comfortable." The main house was impressive, far larger than Katherine's family homestead. The central hallway opened to a parlor on one side and a dining room on the other, with a wide staircase leading to the upper floor. At the back of the house, a spacious kitchen gleamed with copper pots and iron cookware. "Cookie handles the meals for the hands," Zachary explained, "but you'll oversee the house, including my meals, laundry, and general upkeep." He showed her a small but tidy bedroom off the kitchen. "These will be your quarters." The room contained a narrow bed, a washstand, a small dresser, and a rocking chair beside the window, different from her mother's, but serviceable. A braided rug softened the wooden floor, and simple curtains framed the window that overlooked a kitchen garden. "It's very nice," Katherine said, genuinely surprised by the comfortable accommodations. "Good. Get settled in, then join me for supper. We can discuss your duties more thoroughly then." Zachary hesitated at the door. "Miss O'Sullivan, I realize this transition has been abrupt. Take whatever time you need this evening. Your duties can begin tomorrow." With that, he left, closing the door behind him to give her privacy. Katherine sank onto the bed, the events of the day finally catching up with her. Just this morning, she'd been preparing to auction the last of her possessions with no clear path forward. Now she was installed as housekeeper on one of the county's largest ranches, and all because a stranger had looked at her and said, "I'll take you instead." When Danny delivered her trunk, Katherine unpacked her meager belongings, arranging them in the dresser drawers. She washed her face in the basin, smoothed her hair, and straightened her dress as best she could, conscious that she would be dining with her new employer. The kitchen was empty when she emerged, though delicious aromas filled the air. Following the sounds of conversation, she found Zachary in the dining room, reviewing paperwork at the large oak table. He rose when she entered. "Miss O'Sullivan, I hope you've had time to settle in." "Yes, thank you," she replied, suddenly conscious of the formality between them so different from the charged moment at the auction when he'd made his unexpected offer. "Please sit." He indicated the place setting across from his own. "I usually dine alone, but I thought tonight we should discuss your position here." As Katherine took her seat, a burly man with a full beard entered from the kitchen, carrying a tray laden with food. "Miss O'Sullivan, this is Cookie Samuel Jennings officially, but no one's called him that in years." "Pleased to meet you, miss," Cookie said, setting down plates of roast beef, potatoes, and green beans. "Hope you like simple fare. The boss ain't one for fancy cooking." "It looks wonderful," Katherine assured him, realizing she hadn't eaten since early morning. The simple food was indeed delicious, and she found herself relaxing as the meal progressed. Zachary outlined her duties: managing the household, overseeing laundry, keeping accounts for household expenses, and serving as hostess when business associates visited. In return, she would receive room, board, and $20 monthly, a generous wage for a woman in 1876. "You'll have Sundays to yourself," he added, "and you're welcome to ride to town or visit your parents' graves whenever your duties permit. Hank can arrange an escort if you wish." Katherine nodded, still processing the rapid changes in her circumstances. "Mr. Mitchell, may I ask a personal question?" He set down his fork. "You may." "Why did you really offer me this position? There must be women in town who would have been eager for such an opportunity." Zachary considered her question before answering. "Truthfully, Miss O'Sullivan, I admired your dignity today. You were facing complete ruin, yet you held your head high. That speaks to your character." He paused. "And yes, I could have hired someone from town, but most would have viewed this as a stepping stone to becoming Mrs. Mitchell." Katherine's cheeks warmed at his bluntness. "I see." "I hope you do," he replied evenly. "I'm offering employment, not courtship. The Double M needs a capable housekeeper who understands farm work and can manage affairs when I'm away on business. And you determined I possess these qualities from watching me sell off my family's possessions." A faint smile touched his lips. "I've heard about the O'Sullivan farm for years, Miss Katherine. Your father's reputation as a hard-working man was well known, and after his passing, people spoke of how you tried to keep the place going despite impossible odds." He met her gaze directly. "That tells me you're not afraid of hard work and that you have determination. Those qualities are valuable." Katherine found herself slightly disarmed by his assessment. "Thank you for the explanation, Mr. Mitchell, and for the opportunity." "You're welcome. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some business to attend to before turning in." He rose from the table. "Cookie will show you the pantry and storerooms in the morning. Breakfast is at 6 for the hands, 7 for me." With that, he departed, leaving Katherine alone with her thoughts and the remnants of their meal. She cleared the table automatically, carrying dishes to the kitchen where she found Cookie preparing bread dough for the morning. "Don't you worry about those tonight, miss," he said, nodding toward the dishes. "You've had a full day. Best get some rest." "I don't mind," Katherine replied, already rolling up her sleeves. "It helps me think." Cookie studied her for a moment, then nodded approvingly. "You'll do just fine here, Miss O'Sullivan. The boss made a good choice." As she washed the dishes, Katherine wondered if that was true. She knew nothing about Zachary Mitchell beyond his apparent success and the respect he commanded from his employees. He seemed fair, if somewhat abrupt, and his offer had saved her from destitution. For that alone, she owed him her best effort, Later, lying in her new bed, Katherine listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling for the night. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. Closer, the soft nickering of horses in the stable provided a comforting counterpoint to the silence. It was different from her homestead, yet not entirely foreign. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for the first time in months, Katherine felt something like hope. She had work, shelter, and a purpose. It was more than she'd had this morning, and perhaps it was enough for now. The first week at the Double M passed in a blur of activity as Katherine familiarized herself with her new duties. The house was well maintained but clearly in need of a woman's touch. Mrs. Winters, the previous housekeeper, had been efficient but lacked any sense of warmth or aesthetic consideration. Katherine found herself sorting through linens, rearranging furniture for better flow, and adding small touches that transformed the functional house into something more homelike. Fresh flowers from the kitchen garden appeared on the dining table. The parlor curtains, laundered and pressed, hung with new precision. Even the kitchen gleamed with extra attention. Cookie, initially territorial about his domain, gradually warmed to Katherine's presence, especially when she proved adept at baking. Her mother's bread recipe won him over completely. "Where'd you learn to bake like this?" he demanded after sampling her first loaf. "My mother taught me," Katherine replied, pleased by his approval. "She always said good bread was the foundation of any meal." "Smart woman, your ma," Cookie declared, cutting another thick slice. Zachary Mitchell remained something of an enigma. He rose early and often returned late, his days consumed with ranch business. Their interactions were cordial but limited, usually confined to breakfast and occasional evening meals when he wasn't dining with the hands in the bunkhouse. Katherine observed him when she could, trying to understand the man who had so dramatically altered her fate. He was fair with his workers, generous with praise when deserved, and firm when necessary. The ranch hands respected him without fear, a telling indicator of his character. On her first Sunday off, Katherine borrowed a gentle mare named Daisy and rode to visit her parents' graves. Hank insisted that young Danny accompany her, for propriety's sake, though Katherine suspected Zachary had given the order for her safety. The homestead looked abandoned already, though only a week had passed. Weeds pushed through cracks in the porch steps, and the windows stared blankly like sightless eyes. Katherine felt a pang of loss but pushed it aside as she climbed the small hill to the family plot. Someone had been there since her departure. Fresh wildflowers lay on both graves, and the area had been cleared of weeds. Katherine knelt in surprise, touching the blooms gently. "Mr. Mitchell rode out here yesterday," Danny volunteered, shuffling his feet nearby. "Said it wasn't right for folks to be forgotten." Katherine blinked back unexpected tears. "He did this himself." "Yes, wouldn't let anyone else come along neither." The knowledge settled strangely in Katherine's chest, a warm weight of gratitude mixed with confusion. Why would Zachary Mitchell, a man who barely knew her, show such consideration? That evening, when she returned to the ranch, she found him on the porch, reviewing cattle tallies in the fading light. "Thank you," she said simply, stopping at the bottom of the steps. Zachary looked up, his expression questioning. "For tending my parents' graves," Katherine clarified. "It was very kind." He set his papers aside. "Your parents deserve respect, Miss O'Sullivan, as do you." "Still, it was thoughtful. I appreciate the gesture." Zachary nodded once, seemingly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "How are you finding your position here?" The change of subject was abrupt but welcome. "Very well, thank you. Everyone has been most helpful." "Good. I noticed the improvements you've made to the house." Katherine smiled, pleased that he had observed her efforts. "Just small touches. They make a difference." He hesitated, then added, The place hasn't felt like a home since my mother passed 5 years ago. She would have approved of your changes." It was the most personal statement he had made since her arrival, a small glimpse into the man behind the rancher's practical exterior. "I'm glad to hear that," Katherine replied. "Would you tell me about her sometime? It would help me understand how to make the house more to your liking." Something flickered in Zachary's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or the shadow of old grief. "Perhaps, sometime." He gathered his papers. "Good night, Miss O'Sullivan." "Good night, Mr. Mitchell." As Katherine watched him enter the house, she realized that her curiosity about Zachary Mitchell was growing beyond professional interest. There was something compelling about his quiet strength and unexpected moments of kindness. She reminded herself firmly that she was his employee, nothing more. Her position depended on maintaining appropriate boundaries, and romantic notions had no place in their arrangement. Still, as she prepared for bed that night, the image of Zachary kneeling at her parents' graves lingered in her mind. The second week brought unexpected developments. A telegram arrived announcing that Zachary's business associate, Gerald Winston, would be visiting from San Francisco to discuss cattle contracts. The news sent Cookie into a flurry of menu planning, while Katherine turned her attention to preparing the guest room and ensuring the house was immaculate. "Winston's an important connection," Hank explained when he caught Katherine polishing the rarely used silver service. "Ships beef to San Francisco restaurants. Could mean a big contract for the Double M," Katherine nodded, understanding the significance. "I'll make sure everything is perfect." Gerald Winston arrived 2 days later, a portly man with expensive tastes and wandering eyes. Katherine found herself uncomfortable under his assessing gaze as she served dinner the first evening. "Mitchell, you've certainly upgraded your household staff," Winston remarked, watching Katherine pour wine. "Quite an improvement over that dour-faced woman you had before." Zachary's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Miss O'Sullivan manages the house admirably." Winston's eyes lingered on Katherine's figure. "I can see that. Tell me, my dear, how did you come to work at the Double M?" Before Katherine could form a response, Zachary intervened. "Miss O'Sullivan was highly recommended. Now, about those shipping rates you mentioned." The deliberate redirection wasn't lost on Katherine, who silently thanked Zachary for his intervention. Winston's attention shifted back to business, though his gaze occasionally strayed in Katherine's direction throughout the meal. Later, after Winston retired to the guest room, Katherine found Zachary in his study. "I've laid out fresh towels for Mr. Winston and left water for washing," she reported. "Thank you." Zachary looked up from his desk. "I apologize for Winston's behavior. He forgets himself sometimes." "It's not uncommon," Katherine replied diplomatically. "Men often see women in service positions as available." Zachary's jaw tightened. "Not in my house." He rose, moving to stand by the window. "If he makes you uncomfortable, please tell me immediately." The protective sentiment surprised and touched her. "I will, thank you." He turned, studying her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Katherine," he began, then stopped himself, reverting to formality. "Miss O'Sullivan, you're a valued member of this household, not an object for men to admire. I hope you understand that." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent an unexpected warmth through her. "I do, Mr. Mitchell, and I appreciate your concern," he nodded, seemingly wrestling with something unspoken. "Good night, then." "Good night." Katherine retreated to her room, conscious of a shift in their relationship, subtle but significant. Zachary Mitchell saw her as more than a housekeeper, but what exactly did that mean? And why did the possibility both unsettle and excite her? The following day, Winston continued his negotiations with Zachary while Katherine managed household affairs, careful to minimize her interactions with the visitor. By evening, Zachary announced that they had reached an agreement that would secure the double MTKS cattle contracts for the next year. "This calls for celebration," Winston declared, producing a bottle of expensive brandy from his luggage. "A toast to prosperity and pleasant company." His gaze lingered on Katherine as she arranged dessert plates. The evening progressed with Winston becoming increasingly bold in his comments, despite Zachary's growing tension. After dinner, they retired to the study, where Katherine served coffee before excusing herself to oversee kitchen cleanup. She was folding linens in the laundry room when Winston appeared in the doorway, his face flushed from brandy. "There you are, my dear. I was hoping for some personal attention." Katherine straightened, maintaining distance between them. "Mr. Winston, I believe Mr. Mitchell is waiting for you in the study." Winston stepped closer. "Mitchell won't mind sharing. Pretty girl like you must get lonely out here on the ranch." "I'm quite content with my position, Mr. Winston," Katherine replied firmly. "Now, if you'll excuse me," Winston moved surprisingly quickly for his size, blocking the doorway. "Don't be so hasty. I can make it worth your while." He reached into his pocket, producing several gold coins. "What do you say to a little arrangement between us?" Katherine's face burned with indignation. "I say you should return to the study before you embarrass yourself further." Winston's expression darkened. "Playing hard to get. I've bought better women than you with less." He reached for her arm. "That's enough, Winston." Zachary's voice cut through the room like a whip crack. He stood in the hallway, his posture rigid with controlled anger. Winston withdrew his hand, forcing a laugh. "Just having a friendly conversation with your lovely housekeeper, Mitchell. It didn't look friendly to me." Zachary's voice was dangerously quiet. "Miss O'Sullivan, please check if Cookie needs assistance with breakfast preparations for tomorrow." Katherine recognized the dismissal for what it was, an opportunity to exit the uncomfortable situation. "Yes, Mr. Mitchell," she replied, slipping past Winston without meeting his eyes. As she hurried toward the kitchen, she heard Zachary's controlled voice. "We need to discuss appropriate behavior in my home, Winston." The next morning, Gerald Winston departed earlier than planned, his manner subdued and his farewell to Katherine noticeably formal. Zachary accompanied him to the waiting buggy, their conversation brief and professional. When Zachary returned to the house, he found Katherine arranging fresh flowers in the dining room. "Mr. Winston sends his apologies for any misunderstanding," he stated, his tone making it clear the apology had not been voluntarily offered. Katherine nodded, appreciating Zachary's intervention without needing to discuss the details. "The contract was secured." "Yes, with favorable terms." He watched her work for a moment. "You handled yourself well, Miss O'Sullivan." "Thank you." She hesitated, then added, "As did you." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I've dealt with Winston's type before. They respect only one language, firm boundaries, and financial consequences." Katherine arranged the last bloom, considering her words carefully. "It must be difficult, balancing business relationships with personal principles." "Sometimes," Zachary acknowledged, "but some lines shouldn't be crossed, regardless of profit." Their eyes met, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Katherine felt something shift again, a deepening of respect, perhaps, or the beginning of something more complex. "Will you join me for dinner this evening?" Zachary asked suddenly. "I'd appreciate the company after Winston's visit." The invitation surprised her. "Of course, if you wish." "I do." He seemed about to say more but checked himself. "Until this evening, then." As May turned to June, life at the Double M settled into a comfortable rhythm. Catherine's duties expanded as she demonstrated her capabilities, taking over the ranch accounts and correspondence in addition to household management. Zachary increasingly sought her opinion on matters beyond traditional housekeeping, creating a partnership of sorts that blurred the lines of employer and employee. Their evening meals together became a regular occurrence opportunities for discussion that ranged from ranch business to literature, and occasionally more personal revelations. Katherine learned that Zachary had come west at 19, working as a ranch hand before saving enough to buy his first cattle. The double M represented 10 years of relentless effort, strategic risk-taking, and occasional good fortune. In turn, she shared stories of her childhood on the farm, her father's dreams for the land, and her mother's quiet strength that had held the family together through difficult times. "You're like her," Zachary observed one evening as they sat on the porch watching a spectacular sunset paint the sky in vibrant oranges and purples. "You have that same resilience." Katherine smiled at the comparison. "I hope so. She faced every challenge without complaint. As do you." His gaze was warm as it rested on her face. "The double M has never run more smoothly." "I enjoy the work," Katherine admitted. "It gives me purpose." Something flickered in Zachary's expression, a shadow she couldn't quite interpret. "Is purpose enough, Katherine?" It was the second time he had used her given name, and again it created a ripple of awareness through her. "For now," she replied softly. The moment hung between them, charged with unspoken possibilities before Zachary cleared his throat and rose. "It's getting late. Good night, Miss O'Sullivan." The formality felt like a deliberate step back from the intimacy they had been approaching. Katherine nodded, accepting the retreat. "Good night, Mr. Mitchell." As she prepared for bed that night, Katherine acknowledged to herself that her feelings for Zachary Mitchell had developed beyond professional respect. His integrity, quiet strength, and occasional glimpses of vulnerability had combined to create an attraction she found increasingly difficult to ignore. Yet their positions made any such feelings inappropriate. He was her employer, she his housekeeper. The imbalance of power created boundaries that shouldn't be crossed, regardless of what her heart might wish. The summer cattle drive brought new challenges to the double M. Zachary and most of the hands would be away for nearly 3 weeks, driving 2,000 head to the railhead at Modesto. Katherine would remain behind with Cookie, Danny, and 2 older ranch hands to manage the homestead. The evening before departure, Zachary reviewed final instructions with Katherine in his study. "Hank will stay in contact through the telegraph in Stockton. If there's any trouble, send Danny to town immediately." Katherine nodded, making notes in the household ledger. "We'll manage fine, Mr. Mitchell. Don't worry about things here." Zachary watched her efficient movements, her copper hair catching the lamplight as she bent over the accounts. "I have complete confidence in you, Miss O'Sullivan." She glanced up, catching an expression in his eyes that made her breath catch. "Thank you." He stepped closer, hesitating before speaking again. "Katherine, there's something I should tell you before I leave." The use of her given name and the serious tone made Katherine's heart quicken. "Yes." Zachary seemed to struggle with his words. "These past months, having you here has changed things, changed me." He ran a hand through his dark hair, uncharacteristically uncertain. "I find myself thinking of you as more than my housekeeper." Katherine set down her pencil, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "Mr. Mitchell, Zachary," he corrected gently. "When we're alone, at least." "Zachary," she repeated, the name feeling both foreign and right on her lips. "I'm not sure what you're saying." He took another step closer. "I'm saying that I care for you, Katherine, more than is proper between employer and employee." The confession hung in the air between them, dangerous, thrilling and complicated. Catherine's mind raced with implications while her heart urged her to acknowledge her own feelings. "I don't expect anything," Zachary continued quickly. "I just wanted you to know before I leave. When I return, we can discuss what this might mean, if you're willing." Catherine found her voice at last. I care for you too, Zachary, but our positions can change," he finished, "if we both want them to." The possibility hovered between them like a fragile hope. Catherine nodded slowly. "When you return, then?" Zachary reached for her hand, his touch sending warmth through her fingers. "When I return," he agreed, bringing her hand briefly to his lips before releasing it. The gesture, old-fashioned and respectful, moved Catherine deeply. "Be safe," she whispered. "I will." With visible reluctance, he stepped back, resuming his role as ranch owner. "Good night, Miss O'Sullivan." "Good night, Zachary." The cattle drive departed before dawn the next morning, a controlled chaos of bellowing cattle, shouting cowboys, and thundering hooves. Catherine stood on the porch, watching until the dust cloud disappeared over the eastern hills. 3 weeks stretched before her time to consider what Zachary's confession might mean for her future. The prospect both excited and frightened her. She had come to the Double M as a desperate woman with few options. Now she found herself contemplating a future with a man who had once casually announced, "I'll take you instead," at an auction of her last possessions. Life at the ranch settled into a quieter routine with most of the hands gone. Catherine filled her days with household tasks, garden work, and riding lessons from Danny, who proved a patient teacher despite his youth. "You're getting better, Miss Catherine," he announced after she successfully guided Daisy through a series of turns in the corral. "Soon you'll ride as good as the boss," Catherine laughed. "I doubt that very much, but thank you for the encouragement." 2 weeks passed without incident. Letters arrived from Zachary, addressed formally to Miss O'Sullivan but containing personal postscripts that made her smile. The drive was proceeding well, with good weather and minimal problems. Then disaster struck. Catherine was awakened in the night by Cookie pounding on her door. "Miss Catherine, fire in the south pasture." She threw on her clothes and rushed outside to find the night sky glowing orange in the distance. Lightning from a dry storm had ignited the parched summer grass, and strong winds were pushing the flames toward the ranch. "We need to dig a fire break," Cookie shouted over the distant roar. "Jeb's gone for help from town, but it'll be hours before anyone arrives." For the next several hours, Catherine worked alongside Cookie, Danny, and old Hank Harper, the remaining ranch hand. They dug furiously, creating a wide strip of bare earth between the approaching fire and the ranch buildings, then soaked the ground with water hauled from the well. By dawn, they were exhausted, filthy, and desperately watching as the fire reached their makeshift barrier. The flames leaped high, devouring the dry grass right up to the fire break, then subsided as they ran out of fuel. Sparks flew across the barrier, but Catherine and Danny chased them down with wet blankets, preventing new fires from starting. By mid-morning, the immediate danger had passed. The fire continued to burn away from the ranch, leaving a blackened landscape in its wake. Catherine surveyed the damage from the porch, calculating losses in grazing land and potential feed shortages for the returning cattle. "You saved the ranch, miss," Cookie declared, handing her a cup of coffee. "That fire break was your idea." Catherine shook her head, too tired for false modesty. "We all did." A rider appeared on the horizon, pushing his horse hard toward the ranch. As he drew closer, Catherine recognized Zachary's distinctive silhouette and ran toward the corral, heedless of her disheveled appearance. Zachary dismounted before his horse fully stopped, his face etched with worry. "Catherine, are you all right?" "Yes," she assured him, suddenly conscious of her soot-streaked face and singed clothing. We all are. The ranch buildings are safe. Relief washed over his features as he scanned the property. I got word in Modesto about the lightning fires. I rode back immediately. He looked down at her dirty hands. You fought the fire. We all did, Katherine repeated. Cookie Danny and Hank Harper. Zachary's gaze softened as he took in her exhausted state. You're remarkable, Katherine O'Sullivan. Before she could respond, he pulled her into his arms, unconcerned with the soot that transferred to his own clothing. Katherine relaxed against him, the fear and tension of the night finally releasing as she felt his solid presence. I was so afraid I'd lose you, he murmured against her hair. Lose this place, but mostly you. The confession, raw and unguarded, touched Katherine deeply. She drew back enough to look up at his face, seeing emotions there he usually kept carefully controlled. I'm still here, she said softly. Zachary's hand gently brushed a smudge from her cheek. I've been thinking about our conversation every day on the drive. Life's too uncertain and too precious to waste time with hesitation. What are you saying? Katherine asked, though her heart already knew the answer. I'm saying that I love you, Katherine O'Sullivan. I think I've loved you since I saw you standing proud at that auction, refusing to break even when everything was being taken from you. The words she had hardly dared hope for washed over her. Zachary, I don't want you as my housekeeper anymore, he continued. I want you as my partner, my wife, if you'll have me. Katherine's exhaustion disappeared in a surge of joy. Are you proposing to me while I'm covered in soot and smelling of smoke? A grin broke across Zachary's face. I suppose I am. Is that a problem? No, she laughed, tears mingling with the soot on her cheeks. It's perfect. And yes, I love you too. I have for months now. Zachary's kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with all the emotion they had carefully contained for so long. When they finally parted, both were breathless and smiling. Well now, Cookie's voice called from the porch. Guess that means we need a new housekeeper. Zachary laughed, keeping his arm around Katherine's waist. I guess it does, Cookie. Think you can manage until we find one, the old cook snorted. Been managing longer than you've been alive, boss. You two get cleaned up. I'll fix something special for breakfast. Hand in hand, they walked toward the house that would now truly be their home. What about the cattle drive? Katherine asked suddenly. Hank's in charge, Zachary replied. He can handle the delivery. Some things are more important than cattle. Like what? Zachary stopped, turning to face her again. Like telling the woman you love that you want to spend your life with her, like building a future together. Katherine smiled, feeling truly happy for the first time since losing her family homestead. That auction turned out better than I could have imagined. For both of us, Zachary agreed. Best deal I ever made, saying I'll take you instead. The wedding took place in September, when the summer heat had relented, and the ranch's apple trees were heavy with fruit. The ceremony was held on the Double M, with a canopy erected near the garden where Katherine had planted roses that summer. Sheriff Tanner, who had witnessed their unusual first meeting, stood up as Zachary's best man, while Mrs. Henderson from town served as Katherine's matron of honor. The entire ranch turned out for the celebration, along with townspeople from Stockton who had known Katherine's family. Even Mr. Peterson from the bank attended, though he seemed uncomfortable when Katherine greeted him warmly, perhaps remembering his role in the foreclosure that had ultimately brought her to this new life. Katherine wore a cream-colored silk dress ordered from San Francisco, her copper hair arranged with white rosebuds. As she walked toward Zachary, who waited beneath an arch of autumn flowers, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here from desperate auctioneer of her family's possessions to beloved bride. Zachary watched her approach, his expression a mixture of awe and deep contentment. When she reached him, he took her hands in his, squeezing them gently before they turned to face the minister. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, "we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The vows were traditional but spoken with personal meaning. When Zachary promised to love and cherish Katherine in plenty and in want, his eyes conveyed that he had seen her strength in both circumstances. When Katherine vowed to stay by his side for better or worse, they both remembered fighting fire together to save their home. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister announced. "Mr. Mitchell, you may kiss your bride." Zachary cupped Katherine's face gently in his hands. "Mrs. Mitchell," he whispered before claiming her lips in a kiss that sealed their union and promised a lifetime of partnership. The celebration continued well into the night, with tables set up in the yard and lanterns hanging from tree branches. There was music from local fiddle players, dancing, and more food than Cookie had ever prepared at one time, though he denied accepting any help from Katherine in the days leading up to the wedding. As twilight deepened, Zachary led Katherine away from the festivities to a quiet spot overlooking the ranch. "Happy?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "Completely," she replied, leaning against him. "It's been a perfect day." "The first of many," Zachary promised. "I have something for you." He reached into his pocket and produced a folded document. Katherine opened it, scanning the legal language before looking up at him in surprise. "This is the deed to my family's homestead." Zachary nodded. "I bought it from the bank last month. It's yours again, ours now, I suppose." Tears filled Katherine's eyes. "But why? It's not worth much, and the land, it's worth everything to you," Zachary interrupted gently. "Your parents are buried there. Your memories are there." He took her hand, running his thumb over the gold band he had placed there hours before. "I thought perhaps we could restore the house, use the land for grazing. Your father's dream doesn't have to die, Katherine." Overcome with emotion, Katherine wrapped her arms around her husband. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for understanding what it means to me. Thank you for teaching me that some things are worth more than their price at auction," Zachary replied, holding her close as the first stars appeared above them. The years that followed brought changes to the Double M. The ranch expanded, with the addition of Katherine's family homestead and adjacent properties. The small house where she had grown up was restored and became a retreat for the couple when they needed time away from the busy main house. Their family grew as well. In the summer of 1878, Katherine gave birth to their first child, a son they named James, after her father. 2 years later, Emma joined the family, with her mother's copper hair and her father's determined spirit. A third child, Robert, completed their family in 1883. Katherine never returned to the role of housekeeper, though she maintained an active involvement in ranch operations. Her business acumen and practical farming knowledge complemented Zachary's ranching expertise, creating a partnership that made the Double M one of the most successful operations in the county. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Zachary surprised Katherine with a special gift: her mother's rocking chair, which had been damaged in transport years before and secretly restored by a craftsman in Sacramento. "I thought it was beyond repair," Katherine exclaimed, running her hands over the smooth wood. "Nothing's beyond repair with enough care and patience," Zachary replied, watching as she settled into the chair that had witnessed so much of her family's history. The chair found a place of honor in their bedroom, where Katherine often sat to read to their children or simply to reflect on the journey that had brought her to this life. Sometimes, in quiet moments, she marveled at how close she had come to losing everything, only to gain so much more than she had ever imagined possible. 10 years to the day after that fateful auction, Katherine and Zachary stood together on the porch of the main house, watching their children play in the yard with Danny's younger siblings, who had joined the ranch family after their parents' passing. "Any regrets?" Zachary asked, his arm around her waist in what had become a familiar gesture of affection. Katherine leaned against him, considering the question. "Only that my parents couldn't see this our family, the ranch, how happy we are." Zachary kissed her temple. "I think they know. And I think they'd be proud of what you've built from the ashes of loss." "What we've built," Katherine corrected, turning to face the man who had once casually announced he would take her instead of a rocking chair. "Together." "Together," he agreed, drawing her close for a kiss that still held all the promise of their first. As the sun set over the Double M, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Katherine reflected that some auctions end with more than just the exchange of possessions. Sometimes, they mark the beginning of something far more valuable, a love that transforms loss into legacy and strangers into family. In the years that followed, the story of how Zachary Mitchell acquired not a rocking chair but a wife at an auction became family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren. Each telling emphasized different details: Katherine's courage in the face of ruin, Zachary's impulsive offer, the journey from employer and employee to partners in life and love. But the heart of the story remained the same: that the most valuable possessions are not things but people, and that love can arise in the most unexpected circumstances, even at an auction of last possessions on a dusty afternoon in Stockton, California, where a desperate woman met a determined man who saw beyond her circumstances to the strength within.